Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. Today I'm going over some recent news from the 2022 North Carolina Senate race, and in this, things are starting to get very interesting. So, former North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory, who was elected governor in 2012, ran for election in 2016 and lost by only about 10,000 votes, has announced that he is launching a Senate campaign for the 2022 Senate race to replace Republican retiring Senator Richard Burr. So, why is this important? Well, Pat McCrory, of the announced candidates so far, has the biggest name recognition of all the candidates. And the main concern for a lot of people is, well, Pat McCrory lost in 2016. He lost to a Democrat, now Governor Roy Cooper. So, a lot of times when a candidate in politics loses, there'll be that concern of, well, they lost before, will they lose again? And a lot of Republicans are making that worry about Pat McCrory. Now, of course, it's in 2022, not 2016, so 6 years would have gone by. The circumstances can be different. The candidates can be different as well. Roy Cooper is a very popular Democrat. So, I'm not making excuses for Pat McCrory, but it's more of, by saying, will he lose because he lost before, it's kind of hard to judge 2 years in advance. And also, the primary for both parties is still going on for the seat, so it's kind of hard to tell. But also, there have been instances of when candidates who've lost before in a previous race have come back and won. For instance, in Ohio, Republican Josh Mandel, who ran for Senate in 2012, who lost, he's now running again. It's a little different because he wasn't elected before, but he was the state treasurer of Ohio, so he did have elected office, and now he's running for Senate. So, name recognition is very important in these races, but the main concern among some critics of Pat McCrory is the whole fallout regarding the transgendered bill in North Carolina, which the bill pretty much summed up said that for when you're using a public bathroom, you have to use the bathroom of your gender at when you were born. Like what your birth certificate says your gender is what you have to use. So naturally, a lot of LGBTQ and transgender rights groups got very upset with that. And Pat McCrory in 2016 election, on the same ticket in which Donald Trump and Richard Burr won, Pat McCrory lost by about 10,000 votes, many people citing this transgender bill as a potential reason for why he lost. So there is that concern that if Pat McCrory runs again, which he is going to run again, as he just announced, will any of those transgender bill ramifications still potentially hinder him in his potential candidacy? And I believe the chairwoman of North Carolina Democrats have already made a statement saying, the state of North Carolina, the people of North Carolina remember who he is and remember this bill. So this is very much in the forefront. And if McCrory is the nominee, this will be a very key critical issue. However, Pat McCrory is not the only thing we have to talk about today. Republican Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, elected just in I believe it was 2020, so still very new to the job, is seriously considering running for North Carolina Senate. Now, for longtime viewers of the channel, I mentioned him in a few videos in the North Carolina Senate, I think for 2020, maybe. I'm not entirely sure, but Mark Robinson, I see someone as a potential rising star in the Republican Party. First things first, he is an African-American Republican who was very strong on gun rights for the American people. And that is something a lot of Republicans are going to love. And this guy, Mark Robinson, who got elected lieutenant governor on the same ticket as the Democrat Roy Cooper got elected as governor. North Carolina does them separate. So, Mark Robinson won as a Democrat, won governor. That shows Mark Robinson has a lot of popularity, and he is very well approved of in the state of North Carolina. So, while Pat McCrory might have the name recognition, Mark Robinson, who had a viral video a few years ago, as kind of where he started with politics on defending gun rights and then becoming lieutenant governor, he may not have as much name recognition, not yet, but in my opinion, Mark Robinson might be the strongest candidate, or maybe second strongest candidate, to run for the Senate race if he wants to. And he is seriously considering a run. And this is very important, because if it's Pat McCrory versus Mark Robinson, they did have a poll I'm going to show you in a few minutes, but that would be a very close, contentious primary, because you have a former governor who is pretty much well-known statewide versus the incumbent lieutenant governor who just got reelected, who the state is getting to know, and a lot of Republicans really like, which would make him a very strong candidate. However, that is also not the only thing we have to talk about. Lara Trump, in a new poll, is the GOP frontrunner in the North Carolina Senate race. Now, Lara Trump has not announced whether or not she will run yet. All that we've heard about is that she is looking into it. And for me, this all depends on, does Lara Trump run? If Lara Trump runs, I think she's the Senate nominee, no problem. As popular and well-known as Pat McCrory and Mark Robinson may be, the Republican Party, in a lot of opinion polls after the 2020 election, have made it very clear a majority of Republicans want Donald Trump either to stick around or his influence to stick around. And if you're a pro-Trump Republican in North Carolina, you're probably going to support someone with the name Trump. And the polls so far have suggested that. So Lara Trump is not really taking a while, but she hasn't decided if she's going to run yet. And that's kind of opened the door for Pat McCrory, Mark Robinson, strong Republican candidates to get in the race early and try to build up kind of a grassroots movement and get some fundraising going. So I don't know if it's pushing Lara Trump to the side, but if Lara Trump's going to run, I recommend she do it soon. So even though if she runs, she would probably still be able to win. It just certainly helps in terms of getting fundraising going and getting early support in the primary. So, with that said, now we look at the 2022 Senate Republican primary. Of the polls they've done, it's been very consistent. When Lara Trump is in the poll, she is the leader in the primary. And what's also consistent was Pat McCrory was the leader when Lara Trump was not in the poll. If Lara Trump does not run, one poll has Pat McCrory at 48%. He almost has a near majority against Mark Walker. So yeah, poor Mark Walker, but I don't think there's any way he's going to win the primary now. Pat McCrory will beat him. Mark Robinson would beat him. Lara Trump would beat him. So Mark Walker really doesn't have too much of a chance anymore. But what's really interesting for me is if Lara Trump decides not to run, this new signal poll has Mark Robinson at 20, Pat McCrory at 14. Now, that also has Dan Forest at 13%. So if Dan Forest doesn't run, Pat McCrory versus Mark Robinson may be a very, very interesting fight for the Senate race. Because that will be a very, very good indicator of, after 2020, a lot of Republicans are trying to find their identity. Are they pro-Trump or are they kind of their own traditional Republican that's not just one candidate? And Pat McCrory supported Trump in 2016, but was also critical of some of Trump's style. And Mark Robinson is kind of his own guy, where he probably supports President Trump, but he talks a lot more about issues and stances than about just President Trump. And that would set up a really interesting fight of the Republican Party in North Carolina want to go the future with Mark Robinson or the past with Pat McCrory. And that would set up a very, very interesting fight. But the simple reality is, if Lara Trump runs, I think she's the nominee. If she does not run, Mark Robinson versus Pat McCrory is going to be a very, very interesting primary. Lastly, I just want to remind everyone, here's the 2022 Senate map. This is why North Carolina is so important. We currently have a 50-50 tie in the United States Senate. North Carolina is going to be a very close battleground. If Republicans are able to hold North Carolina, then that could leave the Republicans to be able to go after potential pickups in New Hampshire, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia. That leads to some of those potential pickups. However, if the Democrats hold all of these states and somehow they're able to flip North Carolina, then the Democrats have the Senate majority. That is also assuming Republicans are holding on to Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, which the Democrats very well could win. So, North Carolina is very, very important. What I would say is, if the Republicans are losing North Carolina, then the national environment is probably more Democratic skewed than we would thought. And Wisconsin, Pennsylvania are probably going blue. Georgia's probably staying blue. Nevada and Arizona probably are as well. So it could turn a Republican wave year into a very, very good night for the Democrats in the Senate if North Carolina is going blue. So North Carolina is very, very important. And that's why a lot of strong Republican challengers are getting into it, because they know how important that is. And trust me, the RNC and President Trump alike are going to be putting a lot of emphasis and a lot of time on the 2022 North Carolina Senate race. So that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and when you do subscribe, tap the bell icon so you get notified when I post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.